Welcome. The Green Homes grant scheme obviously has been announced by BEIS, and we're hoping to try and get some answers for you on some of the questions. Gary, would you like to say a few words just to get things started?
But again, I'd just like to say welcome. Thank you so much, Simon, for coming on and helping with this. It's very, very important that we have an opportunity here to help the industry maybe kickstart a little bit after which been really, really difficult times. I hope all of you are well, and I'm going to shut up because I'll wobble on for forever, and pass over to Simon, and I'm just going to absorb now, which I think is going to be some very important information. So thank you all very much.
Good. Well, good morning, everyone. It looks like I'm going to do a bit of an intro for maybe some of the BEIS areas as well, so don't shoot me for some of those things, please. I think probably just to make sure that we're all clear would be that we are going back and looking at the scheme and why we have this scheme. And whilst, you know, we will see lower carbon property coming out of the scheme, it is mainly around an investment into an economic stimulus, and it's around job creation. So the Chancellor, the Secretary of State and Number 10 have all been very, very clear and very driven in terms of spending £2 billion. Yeah, and to answer some of the questions, that has to be spent by the end of March next year, 2021. There is no planned tail, no planned extension at this moment in time. Yeah, they are very clear that the vouchers have to be issued, the work has to be completed, and wherever possible, the vouchers redeemed by the end of March. So we are in a very, very short timescale. However, there are some sort of noises and nuances in language coming out that would indicate if the sector picks up, if the sector takes up the challenge, it moves forward, that the things like the home upgrade grant, which is due to come out in April next year, which is another £2.5 billion investment into raising property from EF&G to higher EPC levels, will come into play. That leaves about 6.7 billion from the manifesto from the Conservatives for further investment around energy efficiency related areas. We also next year, and I'm sure you're all aware, have a review starting of ECO, and ECO will then start looking at what, probably moving from ECO 3 to ECO 4, mixed measures and a very much sort of wider review. I also heard through the grapevine that ECO may be increasing in size as well. So ECO may be going from 640 million per year to £1 billion per year. So there's quite a lot of ifs, buts, maybes, and not sure what's around the corner conversations taking place, which is absolutely, I understand, not helpful when you are trying to build a business, you are trying to recruit people, and you are trying to move forward. But the sort of core of the scheme itself, and I apologise if I'm repeating myself, but it's probably worth just being, I suppose, a bit more factual. There was £3 billion in total investment. £1 billion of that has gone into public sector. There is £500 million going into something called the LAD scheme, which is the local authority scheme, over a similar time period, and that is split into two different areas. And if you're involved with social housing local authorities, you'll be aware of those. And there is then a further £1.5 billion, which is being split. £500 million will be going to the £10,000 grants where there is no funding required from the person receiving the grant, but they will be targeted to the low income areas. You will have a means testing that will take place. And then you have the £1 billion that will be going out with a maximum cap at £5,000 per voucher. And that will be looking for the consumer to invest £1, and for every £1 they invest, they will get £2 from the government up to a maximum of 5,000. So that, and I'm sure you all know that scheme. It's probably worth saying that we have been waiting for an administrator to be appointed, and that has now taken place. So BEIS have appointed an administrator, and I believe the contracts are being signed in the next hours. So we will have an organisation that will be then setting up the application process for vouchers, the whole fraud prevention, the checking, the identity, and all those other areas through to voucher redemption. And that's all being outsourced from BEIS to an external body. The Trustmark role in this is very much around the audit and compliance areas, but it also will be linked to the data warehouse. It will be linked to a range of auditing that will take place, both desktop and on site, and it will be linked into the administrator because they will be validating information to and from the database. So I'm just mindful, Kenneth, actually, am I right? Because I know you told me I only had 3 minutes.
Keep going. Keep going.
3 minutes already, unfortunately.
Keep going. You're fine for time.
So that sort of sets the scheme around the process, and I can't give you an exact area, but the consumer will apply for the voucher, and a voucher can have multiples of businesses within it, because you may have a need to outsource, subcontract some of that work to other businesses. Those businesses all have to be Trustmark registered, yeah, and they should be led by a PAS 2030 organisation. The consumer has a first step that they can go through, which is the Simple Energy Advice Tool, which is a BEIS RDSAP calculator with lots of information. You will find that with the SEA tool, there are 2 routes. One is a Green Home Grant voucher route, and the other is the standard route that they've had for the last 2 or 3 years after each home counts. They're correcting some of the areas because you can slip from one to the other. And if you do that, you get the wrong measures coming back. So there are some changes being made there at the moment. In terms of the measures, then the measures that a consumer can apply for, I think, are probably quite widely promoted. There are some rules about different areas of them. So solid wall, underfloor, cavity, room and roof, yeah, park homes. We have then air source and ground source, heat pumps, solar thermal and biomass, and clean heat technologies. They are all primary measures within the Green Homes Grant Voucher Scheme. And then you have secondary measures, so secondary glazing, replacement of single glazing to double glazing, heating controls, thermostatic radiator valves, energy efficiency lights, draft proofing. There are a number of elements that all come together to give you that secondary measure. If you are installing primary measures, you can only install secondary measures to the same value of the primary to the maximum grant level. So that's all set in the rules that will be coming out. So a consumer picks a business, they will have an idea from the Simple Energy Advice Tool on what they can do to their property, and they will have a plan. The plan will come out, PDF, can be stored, and from that, they will then apply for a voucher. The voucher will be awarded by the administrator. There is a whole routine of checking. So you will have identity checking, fraud checking, property checking, all those things taking place, all linked back through the government schemes. Once that has taken place, the work can be completed. When it's completed, the business will lodge the work onto the data warehouse, Trustmark data warehouse. When that's completed, you can invoice the consumer. The consumer pays any difference if it's in that £1 billion worth of investment. Once you've had that difference paid, you can then claim from the government the outstanding voucher amount up to the £5,000, and they will pay that within 5 to 7 days is what they are trying to get the administrator to ensure happens. On the basis, we all know cash flows in this particular time are crucial. So there's a whole raft of stuff that takes place. As part of that process, we will have two levels of auditing. The first is the administrator will be auditing for fraud. So they have a percentage requirement that they will undertake to ensure that the work has been completed, where it's been completed, at the right property, and there's no fraud taking place. We will then, as Trustmark, be undertaking on-site technical inspections, as happens within the eco world. We'll also be doing desktop monitoring at the same time. The idea being is to ensure, A, we get the quality. We don't have reoccurrences of what happened with the Green Home improvement grants in the scheme, where we had quite a lot of fraud, and I think it was the highest level of action that Action Fraud had taken in the sector. We want to ensure that consumers get value for money. So there will be some checking against the inflationary pricing that we know is taking place. So where people are already saying that actually loft insulation is costing huge amounts of money. So we are trying to understand how that will come into play, but that will be part of the audit and compliance process, because we want to try to make this as fair as possible. So I guess in a way that's an overview of the scheme, the administrator and Trustmark's role. The PAS is something which I'm sure will be a question in a minute. I think I've been pre-warned there will be a few around that, which I can talk through separately when we do those questions, because they have changed the nuance of that slightly. And we are looking at how we can work on a wider field with lots of other businesses to bring everybody really into the sector to support this. My probably passing, or my last comment would be, everything we are being told, and it's very much whether you wish to believe it or not, is that as a sector, if we pull this off, or if we start getting that £2 billion spent, if we then move to a point where we can demonstrate that's taking place, then government will look to actually funding retrofit moving forward. And retrofit is a massive, massive thing that they are now focusing on. You know, I'm guessing we've all heard about it, and it will be made up of, you know, sort of electrification, there is hydrogen coming into play, there is renewable technologies. They all will be impacting on about 20 million homes out of the 28 million we have in the next 30 years. So there's a huge amount, you know, of work to do, and a huge amount of revenues, you know, and business to be created. Kenneth, I think I'll probably stop there and allow.
Okay. Well, we shall bring in some questions. Thank you very much for that, Simon. That was very informative. I don't know if the person from BEIS is online yet. They don't seem to have connected. I can't see them identifying themselves anyway. But if we can start with some questions for you, Simon. We've had a lot of questions, and I'm sure everyone can see that in the chat session there's some more questions being asked. But one of the most frequently asked questions, and I've received quite a few of them on this one subject, which was the March deadline, which you have covered. But do you yourself see that installations will be able to be carried on after the 31st of March, or will that be a case of no, the installation has to be filed and finished by the 31st of March?
So the BEIS position is one that's pretty clear, Kenneth, which is it has to be completed and finished by the end of March 21.
Okay.
So there is no planned extension or tail for completion after that point. Now, that generates all sorts of other challenges, especially when you start talking around installing insulation measures during the winter, poor weather, we've got COVID, we have got a huge amount of challenges that also come into play that I believe government will have no choice but to take into account.
Okay. So we've been asked by Anne Barradine from Insulated Homes, a large number of our elderly vulnerable clients do not have internet. Can we apply for the vouchers for them on their behalf? Oh,
So,
that's Anne just coming on now.
Okay. So the administrator that has just been appointed will be setting up systems and processes to allow people to come through. So the SEA is one route, and there will be other routes established, but that's for the administrator to set up, not for me to advise on. But the answer probably is yes, there will be, and you'll see those, I think, coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Next question, we have a question from Jessica Binks from Improve Easy. What version of PAS 2030 is required for measures installed, and is this the same for all property types?
Right, so answering the second question first, the answer is no. And this is where it will get quite confusing. So the requirement in the only, so I think if this gets confusing, then I will go back through it. If you are an existing PAS business, you will probably now hold, or you may hold, or you may have transitioned from PAS 2030-17. If you have, there is an easement in ECO that allows you to operate under ECO until November under PAS 2030-17, and there will be an agreement under the Green Homes Grant Scheme that you will be able to operate until the end of March, delivering work to PAS 2030-17, even though you may have transitioned to 2030-19. If you are a new business, so you are a business coming into the sector and you are looking to become PAS accredited, you have no other option than to go down the PAS 2030-19 route. But we recognise that there will be businesses that will not be able to meet the PAS 2035 requirements of that, and there will be non-conformances issued for those areas, but a certificate will be then issued by the certification body to allow delivery under 2030-17. All right, and that will remain in place until the end of March 2021. So in other words, there is a, for the Green Homes Grant, you have PAS 2030-17 as a installation requirement, but you must be working towards 2030-19 longer term. There is some confusion around those of you working in ECO, and because of the easement difference, one being November, one being March, and that is still under debate by BEIS as we speak. If you are working or you are intending to work on property which is in the higher risk categories, then you will only be able to do that under 2030, 19 and 2035. So there are numbers there. So it would be anything that is a protected building, park homes and high rise are all within that area. And they all have to be completed under the standard, or what will be the standard 2030-19, 2035 route. Now, what we are issuing and we're finalising today will be the scheme rules, which has all of this in. So there'll be a document like this that is being completed today, and it will be available over the next few days that we will send out to anybody that's involved so that you understand the requirements from Trustmark, and you also have the whole PAS outline, so it's explained easily.
Thank you, Simon. Do you have any follow-up question, Jess? Do you want to?
It was just to confirm, because I lost my connection slightly. You were talking about risk buildings that must all comply with 2019 and 2035. So that buildings, park homes and high rise. But am I right in thinking that that wouldn't be pre-1919?
No. So if it's a protected building, so in some of the terminology you would have seen, it talked about traditional and protected.
Yeah. So
we have now separated that. So it's very clearly, if it's a now I can't even say it now, protected building, it's PAS 2035. Traditional, though, they've recognised that if you put traditional in that, you would probably take out about 40% of the market.
Okay.
But it's in the rules for you. So I'm happy to share these. I'll get them to Kenneth so he can distribute them to everyone that's on the call today.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a question from, well, we've got two questions from Jake Cook and Joe D'Souza, who've both asked about EPC requirements. So will an EPC be required to recommend the measure as a condition for receiving the voucher? And will there be a requirement for a pre and post EPC?
There's this very simple answer, which is no. So under the Green Home Grant Scheme, there is no requirement, for an EPC prior to it, but they will be expecting that you've been through the RDSAP SEA, which identifies what you can and cannot do to your property. But there is also no requirement for a post measure. Now, the only area that you may need to reflect upon. Sorry, we got some feedback, Kenneth, somewhere.
Sure. Yep.
The only areas that is worth the audience sort of keeping track of is a lot of the finance organisations are looking for evidence that something has been completed, and that there's an improvement to the property, and they are seeking EPCs as part of that evidence. So if your customer is borrowing money to do the work, it is worth checking the rules that the finance or the lender is putting in play for some of those areas as well.
Jake, do you want to come back on that? You'll need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muting myself. No, that's pretty clear. Nothing really needs adding there. The only thing I would say is the Simple Energy Advice website, the tool on there, which is obviously based upon current EPC being in place, doesn't seem to work very well because it doesn't recommend a lot of the measures that are actually on the EPC. So if they're going to base the sort of the voucher on somebody getting a plan in place from the Simple Energy Advice website, there's going to be some problems there because it doesn't seem to be recommending all the measures that the property needs. So that was the only thing I'd like to add on that.
It's Jake, it's absolutely something we already know. So
yeah,
we've been, when we started to know how the process was going to work, we started doing some testing before it had the amendments. And there are still challenges because you can end up with a plan with gas boilers still being included in solar PV, which aren't included, which is misleading a consumer. And the other thing about some of those areas, and I know they are updating it, and some of the measures being proposed would drive a consumer away. I did my property and it said something like, if I spent £30,000, I'll get £3.50 back a week, so some of those calculations don't work, and we make sure that it drives the consumer in the right direction.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I did it for my own house and I don't have a rooming roof. The only thing that came up on the plan was a rooming roof insulation, and I don't even have a rooming roof. Everything else that I do need, but that I'd like to get, for example, a ground source heat pump or whatever, and the solid wall insulation didn't even come up. So the only thing I got on the plan was a rooming roof insulation measure. That I haven't actually got a rooming roof. So yeah, but anyway.
Okay. Your comments are taken and we have put them back. So actually, what I would put, Kenneth, if you can sort of bring together any comments around the SEA, I can get those fed straight back into BEIS.
Okay, perfect.
It's probably, having the sector look at it far better than somebody that doesn't really know in some cases what they're looking at.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jake. Next, we have a question from Adam Holvey from Zing Energy. Will there be any guidance on how single or multi-measures should be quoted for and how quotations will be regulated?
So I think this will be one that will come out from the administrator on the basis that they're only probably in play from tomorrow onwards, and they will be looking at exactly those issues that where there are multi-measures by multiple businesses, how you can then look at a claim process that allows those measures not to be, so if you're doing the first measure as a small business, that you can somehow be paid or find a process to be paid, but also how you ensure that there's no fraud taking place through that process. And that's something the administrator will be doing. That's not something I can really comment on, Kenneth, because I don't know the ins and outs of it yet.
Okay. I don't know if, Adam, if you want to respond to that. Doesn't look like Adam's. I think he's muted. So we've, yeah, no response there from Adam. We'll just move on then to the next question. About the 3 quotes. Is the requirement for 3 quotes absolute, and how will the quotes be measured? And from Chris Chapman of the SSE, what control will there be over the quoting process and over the customer sign-off for issue redress, post-installation monitoring, etc.?
Right, I think there's a sort of a number of questions in there, isn't there, really? So in terms of the number of quotes, the plan had always been to seek to get 3 competitive quotes for the work to be undertaken. I think there is also, though, a realization that actually that's now becoming very, very difficult on the basis that the amount of quotes that are already being sought has gone through the roof. So one SME business that I know we engage with told me that they had 61 requests for quotes in 24 hours last week. So I think lots of people are now asking for quotes. So that's something that we fed back into the administrator for them to take a sensible approach to. I think once you have quotes, you will have a nominated business on the voucher, but you can change that business. So for any reason, if anything happens, you are able to move the business. You're not stuck with that business at that point. And when it progresses, the businesses, I didn't allude to this, but any business or any PAS business that is in Trustmark will also just have to register with the administrator. I don't believe there's any charge for that, but that's about you putting the business details on, and the quotes will have to come from those businesses that are within the registration process, so that there is a level of control on that. The administrator then, I'm guessing, will run all sorts of checks to ensure that the value of the quote, the value of an invoice, and check the security, the bank details, and where it's being paid, and to run that through. And that's all going through some of the government schemes as well, which I'm not privy to. So I think that's a roundabout way of saying that will come from the administrator in the next couple of weeks.
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Chris?
No, that's good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then next question we have is from Koljit Kaur. He wants to ask how eco-funding will work with the Greener Home Grant Scheme should a resident qualify under HHCRO. Should we pursue this route, ignore it, and pursue voucher scheme only, or is there a combination of both?
Right, so another one, I don't know whether BEIS have joined, but I am pretty sure the answer from BEIS would be there is no blended funding, all right, but there is nothing wrong with having 2 measures installed into a property, one through ECO and one through the grant scheme, providing they are not blended together.
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Koljit.
Yes,
Thank you. That's fine. It's just to clarify. So, of course, we can, if we're doing two different measures, one we are able to do with eco-funding, and the other one, if we're not providing that and another company is providing the secondary measure, we can do our part with eco-funding, and the other one can go forward with the Greener Home Grant Voucher Scheme, correct?
Yes, that's correct. As long as they're separated, that is correct.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Nina Hyam from Aaron Services. Who and how will the quality and cost of installations be monitored to ensure that issues such as Fishwick Preston do not happen again?
So I think the reason the things have so many sort of administrative levels put in when you're going through the voucher application process, and then out to the point of looking at fraud, we'll pick up the sort of high level areas. The businesses involved have now got to be within Trustmark and under a scheme provider and be through a certificated route. So there is a level of liability that will come back through, and all of the work, so that will be the survey, design, pre-install, it will be things around the declaration of conformity, how the job is protected, and the voucher scheme numbers, etc., all have to be lodged onto the data warehouse. If it's not lodged onto the data warehouse, you will not be able to claim a reimbursement of the voucher. From that, we will be running desktop auditing and then on-site auditing, but we'll also be working with the administrator to identify any areas of risk so that those become targeted for more audit. So there is a whole process that we're putting in play to try to reduce those cases. We are aware, so we have trading standards embedded in Trustmark. So if there is mis-selling, if there are unfair contracts, unfair rules, then we will be dealing with them through trading standards. And we've already reported circa probably 25 or 26 businesses to trading standards for advertising and misrepresentation. So it's started, and there are lots of organizations out there, but we are immediately pushing them through the process at the moment to reduce some of that risk. And I am hoping that as a sector, then we will get hold of this, demonstrate the professional level that we can deliver, and where we find those that aren't, we can stop. The other element would be is that you can only lodge onto the data warehouse if your Trustmark registration is valid. If we identify any business that is non-compliant or is not doing the work as the quality should require, we will suspend that business, which means they will not be able to claim any voucher redemption. So there's a process then that we go into, the remediation process that we have to deal with. So in some of those finer points are just being now really put through BEIS and through the lawyers to make sure that we're compliant in what we're doing. So there, I've got to be able to stand hand on heart as Trustmark and say we are doing our best to ensure that we avoid those issues in the future.
Nina, do you wish to come back on that?
No, that's grand. Thanks for the answer.
Okay. Then we come to a question from Andre Tarza. He's asking, can we ask for the contributions to the customer to be paid in stage payments, especially for large jobs such as EWI, or do we have to wait until completion?
The answer to that one is that BEIS are considering that as part of the process. So they do recognise the investment, and they are looking at how they can support that in stage payments. That's one for the administrator, but it is being considered.
Andre, do you wish to come back on that?
That's good news. That's the best news that you could have hoped for. So thank you.
I'm sorry, Andre, we're not hearing you. The volume's too low.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to Emma Adams from ARP Energy Services. She's asking, how will the green home voucher, home voucher scheme work for blocks of flats regarding cavity wall insulation?
Interesting one. So we, in terms of blocks of flats, then I guess you're going into some high risk areas as well, depending on their size, their levels, the 18-metre wall, what's come out of, obviously, the Hackett wall. We did push a question back to BEIS last week on exactly that, and waiting an answer, which is if you have a number of residents that wish to have work done, but some don't, how do you overcome that? But also, if you are a landlord and own the property and have leasehold on a property, if you wanted to treat it, what's the rules around that? So I think I can't give you a clear answer, but I will get that answer supplied as soon as we have it from BEIS.
Okay, I don't know if you want to come back on that, Emma?
Hi, yeah, thanks for answering that. It was more the low-rise blocks. So, like, if there's a 3-story block with, say, 9 flats, you've got some leaseholders. Would you be able to deal with the property management company to sort the vouchers out, or would you have to go to individual flats? Because I would assume that sort of a mid-rise, low-rise aren't going to be under the high risk. Is that right?
No, they won't be. So it's a good question. Can I add that one to the list to get the clarity? Sorry, and I'm not trying to duck the question. It's just I'd rather I got you a correct answer from BEIS.
That's fabulous. Yeah, we'd really like to know, because we've already got a lot of interest in that, because obviously we are specialised in blocks of flats. So thanks, and thanks, Ken, for that.
Excellent. Okay. Next, we have a question from Zing Energy on park homes. Is there any restriction on the age of construction or the criteria on which archetype qualifies for the voucher, similar to what you would find under eco guidelines? I don't know if that's one that you can answer.
No, I wouldn't. To be honest, Kenneth, I wouldn't even attempt to answer. I don't know, but I will find out what those restrictions look like.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Charlotte Knott from Rockborm, who's asking, can we fit EWI on just part of a property rather than the whole? So if a customer can only afford to have the gable wall done rather than the whole house. So, and Barry Griffiths from Energy Store also asks, is partial fill allowed? So.
Another one, I'm not a technical expert. I don't know the answer to it, but I will put these questions back to the energy team to BEIS today.
Okay. I'm trying to avoid some of the total technical questions, but what is required, as Gavin Keach from Key Systems is asking, what is required of product suppliers in terms of installer and guarantee support?
I'm not sure I quite understand that question.
Well, I don't know if Gavin maybe wants to come in on that.
Yeah, hi, if you can hear me. That was more
Yes.
about the fact that we're being driven. There's a requirement within the whole system for providing potentially a 25-year warranty, and it seems like there's a few details on that need to be clarified, probably by the administrator. But it seems like what's required from us in terms of installer training and providing material warranty is being driven by the insurance-backed guarantee provider, and that isn't necessarily consistent. So I wanted to check if there are any rules or preference within the setup of this as what we'd be needing to provide for as a material provider.
So the my sort of understanding at the moment, Gavin, on this is that the rules that will apply will be the same rules that will apply to ECO. So there will be 25-year warranty requirements for some of those installation measures. There will be the framework requirements for those measures that aren't in that 25-year category. So they would be similar to the requirements for ECO. And we've seen from the BEIS lawyers this morning actually something to drive to ensure that the lodgement will have documents to identify the relevant protection that a consumer has in each of those areas. So in terms of the warranty, I think that's going to sit very squarely and firmly as it does within ECO, but with more validation around the delivery. And I appreciate there are limited suppliers for some of those areas at the moment. So I think that's where we will end up with that. In terms of product, then product, similar rules would apply, which it must be a recognised and certificated product that's being installed.
Great, thank you very much.
We've got a question here from James Blackburn. If a customer has inquired about EWI and the value of the work, for example, is £10,000, will the customer receive the full £5,000 voucher or only 2/3 of the £5,000 voucher if they have contributed the remainder? It seems to be read both ways on different BEIS websites.
As far as I'm aware, if the consumer, if it's a £10,000 job, the consumer will get the £5,000 voucher, because they've invested more than 2,500. So if it's a 7,500 job, the consumer pays 2,500. The voucher will cover the other 5,000. But if you go to 10,000, you still only get it capped at 5. But you would get 5. You wouldn't get. You don't. It's not a reduction down pro rata as such.
Don't know if you want to come back on that, James. Can't hear anything if you're muted. No, don't seem to have response there from James. So we'll move on. Gordon Watts is asking, for private households, is there a required order to the installation of primary measures? For example, if insulation measures are recommended, can a heat pump be installed and voucher reclaimed without first completing all the insulation measures?
No, because under the whole house process and under the MCS requirements, you must treat the property before you install the heat pump. So it should be fabric first, then it should be the low carbon heating sources. So I think that's one that it's one of that also drops into a high risk category, because there are some concerns about people picking out gas boilers and putting in heat pumps without actually treating the property or treating the system. But you're also probably aware that BEIS went through a process and they've issued further guidance on the measures, so that in some cases remediation works can now be undertaken. So if you needed to change the system to suit a heat pump, that can be now included, as can if you've got to remedy issues on a building. That's now included within that feasible amount before you install it.
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Gordon?
Yeah, I will briefly. Yes, I will briefly. Can you hear me? I'm just checking whether I'm muted. Yeah, I am speaking. So you might. So I haven't looked through the SEA tool. SEA tool yet. But if you looked at RDSAP, for example, you'd have a whole list of insulation measures. Is it saying that? And obviously they are of varying difficulty. So you might get a lot of diminishing returns, right? Actually, you could end up insulating that, but it's going to make a difference, but not huge. Is the SAA tool saying that any insulation measure that's recommended has got to be undertaken? All of them have got to be undertaken before you can then put in a heating measure?
I am not sure what the SEA tool indicates to the consumer.
Right. Okay.
I will get that checked. That's another one that we'll put through. But the process that we are expecting, and that you should be under PAS 2030, as will S023, expects you to treat the property fabric first before low carbon, and that's the process we would expect.
Yeah.
However, you're right, the consumer may get the wrong perception if the tool doesn't tell them that at day one. So
absolutely, it's clarity, really. Actually, yeah, great, you can put in a heat pump, but before you do that, there's these other things you've got to do first, and that just needs to be really clear.
Yeah, I will pass that one on and make sure that's picked up as well. So I know they're going to do some messaging, and I think some of that messaging we could probably build or get the administrator to build into the front end of the voucher application. It's very clear that you must do the fabric before you do low carbon.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gordon. We have a question here from Joe D'Souza from Solar Air UK. How soon is the voucher paid once redeemed? And in terms of the fund, is it based on redemption of the voucher or on the application?
So the voucher is based upon, so the redemption is based upon the voucher or your semi-paid invoice being presented back to the administrator. They will check with the data warehouse to make sure that the work is in and everything is compliant within that. And then they are aiming for a 5 to 7 day turnaround for the payment of the voucher to the business.
Would you like to come back on that, Joe?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now, thank you.
Yeah, it's just obviously if there's the £500 million for the 10,000 grant and 1 billion for the 5,000 grant. Obviously, if that gets all used up pretty quickly, how does that work? Is it based on the redemption once the work's been done, the money comes out of the pot?
No, the money will be, so as soon as a voucher, so there will be quotes that will be for, the vouchers will be based on the quote amounts, and that's when that will be come out of the pot. So provisionally, the money is allocated once the voucher is allocated.
So if it's allocated and the time runs out and somebody hasn't redeemed it, it just falls away, gets lost.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. And I think we've got time for one final question.
The pot can go within 2 weeks because everyone's applying for it, and if nobody actually.
Joe's still alive there. Basically on the lodgement front, can you go through the lodgement process, please, and describe what happens between lodgement and payment?
Okay, so lodgement will take place. So at the moment, those of you that are delivering eco will now be into the process of lodging all of the eco measures within the data warehouse. It's a very similar process to that. There will be the requirement for all the documents under PAS 2030-17. When that's complete, the administrator will have an API into that data warehouse, or into our, data warehouse. They will, through the API, run a check to make sure that the work has been completed and there are no obvious issues. Once that's been done, they will then come back, do their own in-house checks, and the voucher redemption will take place. So the process should be pretty straightforward. You will be able to use similar tools that we've had for eco. So there are some third-party tools that are already in play that are being just tweaked and developed to allow that to take place. And if you think, the only real difference is that some of these will be branded as Green Home Grant Scheme, lodgements against an eco measure, which currently still has the same or similar requirements for what you're doing today. So they are very, very aligned in deliberately. So.
I don't know if you want to follow up on that, Emma. Emma Adams. She's asked if we struggle to get payment from the residents on completion of the work, can we still get the grant payment?
It was just a sort of question. I mean, obviously, as all contractors, we try and get payment on, on the day or prior to the job. But there are the occasions where it doesn't go through. But as I understand it, you can only get the voucher reimbursed if you get the payment from the resident first. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's our time.
Can I just ask one question back the other way to the whole
Sure.
order, just for one for you to take away. The government is really keen to understand, and we're sort of doing some bits from our end as Trustmark, the interest and the desire to build and deliver the Green Homes Grant Voucher Scheme. There is a questionnaire coming out that will start talking around how businesses are setting up, gearing up, developing to move forward, both in around sort of, I guess, the installation and the low carbon areas. But if there is, and I guess it's not a question, it's almost a request, if there is any information that you can provide back to us for us to provide the Secretary of State in terms of business growth, and most of that seems to be coming through subcontract, rather than through direct PAS applications, that supports the argument for us being able to then say, this has created X amount of jobs, this is the opportunity to extend it past March. So I think some information coming back from the sector to help us will also help not just the extension in helping to get this grant scheme delivered, it will deliver HUG, it will deliver then this extra money next year. So it's a bit of a request for information from the sector to help us get this now sustainable for the next years, not just the next months.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone will want to contribute to that, and I'm sure that if you want to send anything our way, we can circulate it more widely.
Kenneth?
Yes.
Can I just say something?
Please.
I believe Tom Davies from BEIS is just about to join us.
Oh, excellent. That if he can get it. But,
are you in, Tom?
Tom Colucci-Davies. Yes, he should be in.
Are you now in, Tom? I think Kenneth has just...
I don't have a microphone for him, and I don't have a camera for him.
Well, we don't have a microphone and a camera for you just yet, Tom.
But thank you very much, Simon, for all you've said. That's been very, very informative and very helpful, and I'm sure everyone on the call would like to, to thank you in the traditional.
Put your microphone and your camera on.
Just have a round of applause for Simon. And say thanks. Doesn't work, does it?
Everybody's on mute.
A wave is much easier.
Right, yeah. Hello, Tom. Hopefully we can all see you.
Hi, yeah, I can see you, and hopefully you can hear me as well.
Thank you very much. Basically, Simon has very kindly run through a lot of the questions from Trustmark and from from Trustmark point of view, but perhaps you could just give an outline from BEIS's point of view of what's happening and where things are going.
Sure, yeah, and feel free to interrupt me if I'm sort of going anything you've discussed before as well. So in terms of where we are for sort of scheme delivery and nailing down the details and that sort of thing. So we've got a sort of partner in place. Shortly in place, and we'll be announcing details of who that sort of organisation is for setting up the system through which customers, whether those are owner occupiers, landlords in the sort of social or private sector, can make applications for vouchers for the Green Homes Grant Scheme from the end of September. Those would be assessed, and then as customers sort of are taken through that journey, we're hoping that they can arrange quotes for work sort of right now. At the moment, it's through the Simple Energy Advice website, finding a list of approved installers for the sort of requisite measures that they put into their plan for energy efficiency or low carbon heating. And then once they've had the voucher approved, after applying for that for the end of September, they can arrange and commence the works from that point forward. We've announced some details of the policy at a couple of different stages during August, and there are a couple more junctures where we'll be providing more information about the sorts of and supporting works and enabling works for the measures which are covered for sort of energy efficiency and low carbon heating as we get up to launch, and providing that sort of clarity where we can. So happy to sort of try and take any questions on that, or take things away sort of as appropriate there. I think I'm doing I think we're doing our best to sort of field questions and interest both from sort of stakeholder organisations and sort of wider public, and we've got, I think, good answers to most of them, and I'm keen to see what questions come up today. But we're also aware there are certain things which are being brought to our attention because of the pace at which we're working at, where it'll take a little bit of thinking. We might not have an answer straight away, and in a few cases people might be raising questions that we haven't thought about before, but hopefully that's happening less and less frequently as we get closer to launch as well. But that's where we are in terms of the sort of journey. So the scheme is set up at the moment to run until the end of March. There's a spending review process going on across government at the moment, and one of the things we're hoping for is that the success of the scheme and the other sort of policy initiatives that we're sort of working on around regulations for energy efficiency in the private rented sector, and sort of ambitions for energy efficiency standards beyond that, will provide the confidence to industry to invest, get involved in the scheme, and give them the confidence that the journey for energy efficiency and low carbon heating in the housing across the country sort of is moving in a direction that will enable them to sort of get involved in this scheme and in any continuation of sort of this policy or other policies which are supporting decarbonisation in housing as well. So that's just a quick introduction to sort of where we are, but happy to take any questions, and I will and go from there. Or is there any other things you wanted me to cover or that have come up in the session so far?
We have had a couple of questions that have come up. Simon's done a fantastic job of addressing a lot of them. There's been questions about the SEA, Simple Energy Advice Service, and the quality of the website, and the measures not all being listed there clearly. But we do have a question from Gordon Watts. If you're a social landlord, you may already work with preferred contractors or through frameworks. Will 3 quotes still be required?
So I think the information I think we put out to date has been in the sort of realms of recommendations for the number of quotes that people should get to ensure they're getting good price and got a reasonable sense of what the price for the works they're commissioning should be, but understand the relationships that are there with existing suppliers for different types of ownership. So at the moment, it's not been set out as a requirement, but as a sort of recommendation for owner occupiers. We'll provide that clarity, I think, in the next couple of weeks to hopefully put you at ease. But I think we're responding to that burden that might be placed on some forms of ownership, some organisations that are hoping to get the benefit of the scheme around their existing partnerships and contractual arrangements they might have seen the benefit of so far. So we're hoping we can provide that clarity about to state that this is a sort of recommended approach, but it's not going to be a requirement for 3 quotes, and that's the thinking on that. But aware we need to get a bit more detail about that and give that clarity.
Do you want to follow up on that, Gordon? Come back with anything?
No, that's useful. It's just the reality of, we already work through we have established relationships and trusted relationships where we work, and which leads to efficiency of delivery. Because you're used to working together. So yeah, it's a welcome comment that I would recommend, particularly for people that are not doing this all the time, private householders, three quotes is probably a bit, more important than actually we know that's a stupid price, or that seems too cheap. So yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gordon. We've had a question here from Solar Air UK on the £10,000 grant. Is there a cap on solar thermal? The systems do vary, or is there a fair pricing policy?
Yeah, so just thinking, I suppose there'd be the 10,000 cap on for the low income element of the voucher scheme. So no, I think if that could be for, if you've got a solar thermal system which is close to that cap, or or even beyond it, then yeah, because that's a primary measure, that could be the the full extent of the the voucher could be attributed solely towards the covering the costs of that solar thermal system. As far as I understand, and I think as far as we've developed the policy, we probably need to have a think about ensuring that the recommendations that are going for consumers as they go through either the Simple Energy website or seeking advice from installers. We want to try and flag to them that if they're trying to seek the right combination of bill savings, if it's for say a private household, that perhaps going for that that type of system, making sure that that's the sort of best package of measures to support their bill savings. Whether if there are no energy efficiency measures in that package, but it may be that this this particular residence has already made those arrangements. But for other forms of ownership, whereby it's it may be quite likely that a big solar thermal system is offering a sort of good package of bill savings, then yeah, as far as I'm aware, then the full extent of that voucher could be used for that solar thermal measure. It's probably worth flagging as well that this is somewhere where we need to get a bit more clarity about the solar thermal systems, the types of supporting works that are enabled, and also this distinction where there are different types of sort of solar thermal offerings. And I think we've set out sort of liquid plate and vacuum tubes that are probably quite common, but where there are some systems now which are a combination of solar thermal plus PV electric, but we're focusing on supporting the solar thermal element really, and but we're providing that clarity about exactly what the voucher can cover in relation to solar thermal in the next week or so.
Okay. We've then got a question from Charlotte Knott from Rockworm. She asked earlier, and Simon said he would take this to you guys. Can we fit EWI in just part of a property rather than the whole property? So the customer can only afford to have the gable wall done rather than the whole house. Can they just do partial? We also had a question on is partial fill allowed by Barry Griffiths on Energy Store, and Anne Burradine from Insulated Homes has also asked a question about extensions and the lodgement of information on the system of the EPC, saying that a property has a cavity wall, but an extension is a solid wall but not listed on the EPC. Can they still get access to the grant for the extension, for insulating the extension? So that's the questions on partial.
Okay. Yes, I'll try to cover those, but where there are a couple there, so just let me know if there's any I missed. So on the first point about getting, I suppose, not all wall covered by whether that's sort of external wall insulation or say internal wall insulation, yeah, that would be allowed. So if there's a concern about either the cost of the cost of the measures and therefore voucher contribution not being able to cover all walls in a property, then having some walls included and as part of your package would be acceptable. I think the thing that we're probably wary of and we're sort of geared towards ensuring with the scheme administrator is a concern around sort of price inflation as well. So if we saw prices coming through in voucher applications which we thought for the size of the property should maybe have covered all walls before, and now it seems that a smaller number or smaller proportion is being covered by the voucher, then that's something we want to look at more closely in question. But in principle, if that's the desire of the owner occupier, or whether it's what the voucher will allow, that's okay to have sort of partial wall insulation. I guess what I mean by that is one wall of the four, or two walls of for the side of the house would be fine. Within a room, in terms of sort of partial fill for the cavity wall, that's a question I'll probably take away. I think that would be acceptable from the sort of same logic of allowing sort of external wall insulation from one wall, but that's one I'll probably need to check and take away, and something we can provide more clarity on gov.uk as well. But I think in principle that my sort of answer would tend to go in the same direction. That would be acceptable. But again, we'd be looking at probably scrutinising the benefits of that. That might be something that's flagged when we're reviewing applications of vouchers. That's ensuring the best option for the homeowner and is representing value for money for them. I think in terms of extensions, as long as it's not an extension which is being built and whereby the voucher is covering the cost of a new extension for the insulation measure, extensions can be covered by the voucher. And I think in terms of the EPC relevance, we're not using EPC certificates as they're taken into account, say, for example, in the recommendations on measures for the Simple Energy Advice website. So if they're out of date, there's a risk that the package of measures that might be recommended through that portal might not be exactly tailored to the property as it is at the moment. But measures for extensions of properties will be allowed for sort of insulation, I believe, and I think we've set out a bit of guidance that we published on the 28th on the gov.uk website, which sets out some information on the supporting works that are covered, and I think extensions are set out. What we're covering for extensions is set out there with regard to sort of insulation measures.
I've got a number of people that have come straight back on that, but I'll start with Anne Barradine. I don't know if you want to follow up on that, Anne. No, we're not hearing you, Anne. So doesn't look. We'll go to Ian Naismith. Ian, would you like to come back on that?
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. With regards to what you're saying, doing partial wall, doing one wall, you're actually going back on what the retrofit says, because all you're doing is causing cold spots, thermal bridging, damp, mould, and underpass 2035, 2019, you've got to do 100% of the property. I know under the current eco, they get away with doing 67%, But to do this, it's a backward step. You either need to do the full building or you don't do anything, because all you're doing is causing problems further down the line. And it would be interesting to see what Trustmark's views are on that, because they're going to be stamping and auditing these. So it would be interesting to hear what Simon's thoughts on that were as well. But I certainly believe that's a very backward step you're taking, and you haven't thought it through properly. If you listen to David Pierpoint, do your retrofit work, understand people are obviously missing a major point, and you're going to damage properties more than you're going to help fuel poor. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's something we'll sort of take away and consider. And I think those are valid concerns. I think it's trying to sort of gather the right package of benefits that we're offering to households against mitigating any damage, any backward steps, both in the standards we're setting out across PAS and the aspirations there, but also in terms of the sort of quality of the work and any needs for sort of remedial work that comes through in any of the measures that are installed. So I think we'll take that away. Like I say, I think it's one where we will be scrutinising, voucher applications, both looking at sort of value for money concerns, but also in terms of the benefits that those installations might be offering to households. But I think I'll take away and sort of look at those concerns around, where partial wall installation or not covering all walls, the risk that might be doing more harm than good, and making sure that those cases sort of are scrutinised and are sort of weeded out through the application process as well. See what we can do. But yeah, that's it. So take that point.
I don't know if you want to come in on that, Simon.
Yeah, thank you. I think actually it's worth probably just reflecting back as well, which under the lodgement process, even though we are operating under 2017 on the install requirements, we have building survey pre-design, we have energy efficiency measure design, and we have pre-installation building inspection, which should help. And I know where Ian's coming from in terms of 2035 and that whole house approach that David and others are driving. But we are sort of being mindful that we're trying to find that ground in between, Ian. So we are really very much trying to push what you're saying in terms of making sure we don't create a situation or allow a situation to be created that damages the infrastructure of a building. And we will look at those building designs and those building programs to see whether that can be picked up. And we are talking to BEIS about it. So be rest assured, we are aware of what you're raising.
Just on the extensions point, just to clarify, I think what we probably set out, just sort of referring to the guidance, what we've said is that for extensions, as you might expect, these are, if extensions don't have planning permission or building permission, or don't have fixed heating, so that sort of distinction between extensions and outbuildings, those wouldn't be covered by the voucher. But in principle, an extension that's already been built with the right permissions could be eligible.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully that's answered your question, Ian.
Yes, thanks. Yes, thank you, Simon and Tom.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have a question from Susan Shearer, is asking, how will the scheme be monitored to allow companies to not overcharge, for example, the elderly and ripping them off for their life savings? So,
yeah, I can say a bit more about that. So, with, I think, developing the sort of, an approach to combat any risk of fraud or gaming of the system, and ensuring that's sort of built into the the policy design and policy administration to the greatest extent we can. I think for ensuring people are not ripped off or overcharged, we've reserved the right to put in any applications, and approval will be, on the basis of how the value for money that's presented by the measure based on the details provided. We can ask for clarity about any suspect pricing or cases where we think overcharging is being offered. And there is the risk of any installer that's giving those inflated prices, that the application wouldn't be granted and would be refusing up on that basis. So we hope those things will mitigate the risk of overcharging and sort of rip-off pricing, because of the risks it proposes for installers of not getting any money if they try to take advantage through that mechanism. But we'll take away that point. And if there are any specific sort of more specific concerns beyond sort of strict pricing, we will be checking all applications so that if one of the routes might be, for example, somebody implying to a consumer that they're going to cover do a measure which is more extensive or is going to cover more of their property than actually they plan to do, that will come out through the checks of the work that are being done, both the sort of quality and auditing, both on site and sort of desk side of desk checks that will be into the scheme as well to try and avoid that. But we're aware that's a risk, and we're working hard to try and minimise that.
Do you wish to come back on that, Susan?
Yeah, thanks. Will every job be checked through Trustmark?
It would depend on the measures. So we're looking at sort of proportion of them in terms of sort of site audits and checks, but all of them will be subject to some form of checking that the work's been done. And in terms of installers receiving any payment, that won't take place until the consumer is confirmed that they're satisfied with the work done as well. So that's sort of one barrier to installers being compensated and paid for work that's not been adequately carried out. But for some measures it may be that all measures are checked, but for others it may be that a proportion is done, and that would be assessed on the risk we associate with that particular measure, based on the risk for the other work being done poorly or consumers being overcharged as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Now we've got another question here from another one from Emma Adams. How long will the checking process take to confirm works can go ahead? So after an application's put in.
Yes, I think in the sort of best case scenario where the pricing of the application is what we'd expect, maybe the type of measure, the type of property, are sort of more common or more standard. We'd expect that that's done within a week, within a few working days. But for either concerns around the pricing, the value for money, or the type of measure and the suitability of the package, that may take there may be a bit more need for actually the checking to be a bit more extensive, and that could take longer as well. But we're working towards the case where if an application is completed in a way that doesn't raise any questions, that will be done in a few days, and within a week is the ambition.
Then we have a question that was asked earlier. We've had Anne Bardine asked Simon about elderly clients who do not have internet access. Can the installer apply on behalf of the client for the voucher? Simon said he would take that back to you guys.
Yeah, so I think we're trying to look at what we can do there to balance the concerns around gaming, fraud and mispricing against the benefits that installers may be able to offer through existing relationships they have with a customer. For example, I guess in the case of an energy supplier, where actually you may think it's the process of an installer taking a customer through it or applying on behalf of them could offer real benefits against the risks of consumer being taken advantage of through someone applying on their behalf. So at the moment, the proposal is that this will be consumer-led, and consumers will need to be aware. It could be possible for installers to help a consumer and help to answer the questions. But one of the checks that might be applied to any application is to check with the consumer that they're aware of it, the details are recognisable to them, and that they're aware of the measures that are within the application. Will provide more clarity on. I think there's a bit more of a discussion we need to have within BEIS, but would also provide more clarity on exactly what relationship installers can have with the customers while they're making the application, and what input they can provide that we think is sort of acceptable.
Do you wish to come back on that, Anne? We're not hearing you, Anne. No, I don't think we've got no microphone for that. So we've got a question. Question from Andre Tarza. I understand the concerns around price inflation. On the other hand, what measure will be taken to support installers along this very challenging period? You're basically asking us to do a lot of work in winter, cold, wet, short days with a cliff edge at the end of it. So,
okay, yeah. So I think for on our side, it's minimising the window between satisfactory completion of the work and repayment. As I guess one of the additional things you haven't mentioned there, but yeah, it's probably in your mind, is that we're asking installers to carry out this work and then be compensated for either the full cost of the measure if it's on the low income scheme, or 2/3 of the cost through the sort of main voucher scheme, compensation from the government, following completion of the work. So we're aware of that and what we're asking there, but it's just minimising that window through the grant administrator. So again, a sort of small number of days repayment. Yeah, I guess on the point about the longevity of the scheme, I guess we'll hope between now and the end of March to have given more clarity about a future for the Green Homes Grant Scheme, or support offered for the industry through regulatory expectations, or the move towards higher standards in households for energy efficiency and low carbon heating over the next few months to give that confidence. We're also, I think, setting out a package of skills and training opportunities, and announcing a competition for skills in supply chain in the next few days, which we're hoping will also give industry confidence that they can see the benefits of the investment we're making there to support them and back the investment that we're asking them to make.
Andrew, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Tom, for clarifying this, and yeah, just maybe to point out that not all installers are out to get the customers and to push prices up. Right? Prices will increase if there's more demand. It's just economics, especially if it's in such a short period. We did have a discussion.
I'm here.
We're having difficulty hearing you, Andre.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. It's my microphone. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Well, I think we'll have. I don't know if you caught anything of what Andre was saying there, but I think you've answered most of his main points. We've got a question here from I'm not sure who this question's from, but it says, how do we evidence the customer has paid their contribution before the release of payments to the installer?
Sorry, can you just repeat that one?
Yep. So how do we evidence the customer has paid their contribution to then release payment to the installer.
Okay. So I think we'd be, asking for evidence from the installer to confirm that's been done. But I guess it would be, the expectation would be on the installer to recoup that that part of the costs. I don't think I will probably try and provide a bit more clarity on what the expectation is. I'm not aware that we'll be expecting installers to, if the installer has undertaken the work satisfactorily and to a high standard, and then the customer is not paying them, that shouldn't prevent the rest of the contribution being coming through to the installer, and the installer shouldn't suffer for that. But I'll take that away, and where we probably need to set out a bit more detail on the installer journey for that. But that's probably the thinking and the way we're trying to design the policy for sort of that element. But we probably are asking for the installer to make that arrangement and provide evidence of receiving that payment. But we'll also be looking for that for the consumer when we're checking that the work's been satisfactorily completed, that they have then paid their share of the costs as well. In terms of, I guess in that case, in the case you're sort of describing, if a consumer hasn't been forthcoming and hasn't paid their share of the costs, that may be that we're sort of looking to explore resolving a dispute, and we've got a number of steps in that process, and Trustmark has got a role in that, but so does the department and other organisations to try and resolve those issues as well, both for the satisfaction of customers and the installers.
Well, I think we've got through most of the questions that have been asked, and thank you very much, both of you. I think you wanted to just wrap up, Gary?
Yes, please. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Simon for his time and expertise. We've already had a number of comments back saying it's been very, very useful. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the call. Apologies for catching you on the hop a little bit. I think going away, there are obviously an awful lot more questions that need answering. It's really good that Simon, when you can send over the rules, we will distribute them to everybody. That's a logical thing to do. And of course, if I may, I'll send to Tom and Simon an overview of all the questions, so that you've got all the questions and you can sort of chew the fat on them. One of the main concerns, I think, myself, is the supply chain won't be able to cope with the demand to spend £2 billion by the end of March. And to take back, Tom, we need an extension to do the installs. We need 12 months, because a lot of the installs that you're asking to be done are carried out over the winter, EWI, for instance, where you need 5 degrees and rising. We want to get a good, proper job done. Let's give the industry the opportunity to do that, to give a good, proper job. We need to help these vulnerable people. We need your help to allow the industry to help get this money spent, but to do it right. And I think, Simon, I applaud everything you're trying to do and have been successful doing in raising the standards of what we're doing. I think it's honourable. And especially helping these vulnerable people. The people on this call today, and there are a number of people that couldn't make this call today, unfortunately, we're all in it together. And I think we all want to make this succeed, but we need to help each other here from both sides. Communication is key. We as an association will obviously try and get information out to you as much as possible. I'm going to talk to Simon and also to BEIS. there might be an opportunity to maybe we might have to do another one of these. I found this extremely interesting for when I've been in front of the computer. Unfortunately, I've been sorting Tom out onto the call. I thank you all for spending time. I hope it's been useful. Please let me know your feedback, because this is the first time we've ever done one of these. And you know, there's a few errors that we need to sort out, but more importantly, we want to help. We're here to try and help the industry. That's why we're here. I'm going to wrap up. Everybody knows my number. Just give me a bell. I'd love to have your opinions. Again, I'd like to just say thank you to Simon, and thank you for Tom for coming on. Tom, good luck this afternoon with the NEA Zoom conference call. And that's it from me. We'll be in touch. I'll be able to all update you regarding the awards as well, but that's another matter. So finally, I'd like to give Simon a wave to say thank you so much, sir. And good luck, everybody. We need to pull this together. We need to remain optimistic, and let's make this work. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.